The kitchen light is low, a single bulb humming over a stack of envelopes. Outside, rain taps the window like a patient question. You watch the numbers on your bank app blink, small, stubborn digits, and a familiar voice slides in, soft as a habit, not now. Better safe than sorry. It sounds responsible, almost proud, the kind of sentence your mother might have said at a checkout line. Your hands fold around a mug that's gone cold. Across the table, your partner murmurs, "Maybe we can wait until next month," and you nod, not because you're certain, but because the automatic no is quicker than thinking. This is our ordinary hero, someone who has chosen caution for years and called it wisdom. In the living room, the TV drones a late-night show, a laugh track punctuating the quiet. At work, a colleague mentions a small investment idea and your stomach tightens before your brain can speak. "I can't," you tell yourself, like a shield. On the street, a woman passes with a bright coat and a confident stride, and you feel two things at once, admiration and the old whisper that change is dangerous. Then something cracks. Maybe it's a single word from an old friend, "Why not try?" Or a late-night article that names the feeling, scarcity. Suddenly the voice in your head sounds smaller, like a cassette tape left too long in the sun. You see patterns, the polite refusals, the postponed dreams, the way your breath shortens when opportunity knocks. Fear has been doing the heavy lifting for you, and the law of attraction has been listening, not to your list of wants, but to the shape of your daily feelings. Do you want your life to keep matching that voice? I ask, not to judge but to open a door. You shift in your chair, the rain seems softer now. If one of those quiet refrains belongs to you, linger a moment, like this video, leave a small sign that you're with me, and subscribe to travel this path together. Next, we'll look closer at how scarcity thinking forms, where it hides in your routines, and the small moments that repeat it every day. He wakes before dawn, not to a dramatic crisis but to a quiet rehearsal, the same thought rolling in like a low tide, "We can't afford that." In the kitchen the kettle hisses and the thought sits between him and the coffee, coloring the day before it begins. She finds the same script in the grocery aisle, comparing labels by instinct, counting in the cart without meaning to. At work a meeting invitation becomes an internal veto, "Better not volunteer, what if I fail?" The voice sounds responsible, even kind, like the parent who once said, "Save for a rainy day," but the tone has narrowed into a default posture that scans every opportunity for risk instead of possibility. Scenes assemble like fragments of a childhood scrapbook, a living room where a small hand reaches for a desired toy and a tired parent says, "Not today," a first job interview where a nervous syllable becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, a late-night balance sheet that feels more like a verdict than information. In the bank, the teller's polite caution slides into his chest as a warm, familiar knot. At dinner he jokes about being practical, and his partner hears relief and resignation braided together. These moments aren't dramatic. They're pedestrian. That's what makes them dangerous. Repetition turns caution into habit, habit into identity. "You're being sensible," the inner voice insists. But the expert quietly reframes the scene. The law of attraction doesn't answer to rational plans, it answers to the emotional climate you live in. When your interior landscape feels tight, the universe reflects tightness back, fewer doors, smaller offers, more reasons to say no. Recognition is the first soft defeat of scarcity, naming the thought, tracing its origin, noticing the bodily contraction. Practice begins with noticing, a pause before the automatic can't, a breath that creates space between impulse and action. Imagine catching one of those automatic no's, saying to yourself, that scarcity talking, and letting curiosity take its place. Which scarcity thought keeps replaying in your mind right now? If this scene hits home, give it a quiet like, and stay with me. Next we'll practice the first simple exercise to interrupt that contraction and make room for a different answer. The kitchen light is low, a single bulb throwing a warm halo over a pile of unopened mail. He sits at the table with his phone in one hand and a mug gone cold beside him. The banking app numbers feel clinical, like a scoreboard he never asked to play on. A small voice slides in, practiced and soft, "Not now. Better to wait." He remembers his mother closing the cupboard on the fancy canned tomatoes when guests came over, "Waste not," she'd say, and how that voice learned to wear the face of prudence. I'm being sensible, he tells himself, but his shoulders are already a little higher, his breath a little shorter. Sensible, in that moment, sounds a lot like a lock. Later, at a small neighborhood cafe, his friend Lena leans forward, eyes bright with an idea for a side project. You should join me, she says. He feels the old reflex, a shutter across possibility. It's risky, he replies. Lena studies him, and then, quietly, she asks, what are you afraid will happen if you say yes? The question is not judgmental, it's a mirror. He finds himself listing practical reasons, timing, money, the kids' schedules, but underneath the list is a tone, a familiar low vibration that has been running an undercurrent through most of his decisions, better safe than sorry. Scarcity doesn't announce itself like a villain. It shows up in the small refusals, skipping the extra course at dinner, avoiding the networking event, shelving the investment idea until later. It repeats because repetition is how habits deepen. The same physiological script plays out each time: tight ribs, a quickened pulse, a mind that looks for reasons to say no. The law of attraction, I explain later in a quiet moment, doesn't answer the words you say, it answers the pattern you live inside. If your default emotion is contraction, opportunities will arrive and feel like threats. We walk through the week like this, noticing the pattern, the impulse to shrink when possibility knocks, the stories that justify it. He begins to name the moments, the price tag, the invitation, the compliment about my success. Naming gives distance. So this is where it lives, he whispers. The awareness itself is a small fissure in the old habit. Which scarcity thought keeps replaying in your mind right now? If you want to keep walking through these fissures with me, subscribe, and in the next part we'll learn simple practices to interrupt that automatic no and open up to what's possible. The morning light slips through half-closed blinds as our hero stands at the kitchen counter, a pile of envelopes like small stakes on the worn wood. They pick up a bill and the familiar whisper comes back before the mind has time to name it: we can't. Not now. It sounds almost reasonable, the voice of practical caution, but under it there's an old echo, a childhood kitchen where a parent tightened their jaw and said, we don't waste money. That echo set the first groove. Scarcity rarely arrives as an alarm, it arrives as repetition. In the grocery aisle, they bypass the organic apples because they're not necessary. At a friend's gallery opening, they smile and tell themselves they shouldn't ask how to get similar opportunities. When the neighbor mentions a side project that pays well, the question that bubbles up is not how but whether it's safe to try. Each small contraction is a little vote, safe over expansive, known over possibility. Those micro-decisions stitched together into an identity, the person who doesn't take risks, the one who plans for storms instead of investing in sunshine. Listen to the brief dialogue playing in the mind: better not risk it. What if we lose what we have? It's too late for me to change. Say those lines aloud and notice the body responding, shoulders tightening, breath shrinking, a hollow feeling behind the sternum. The law of attraction, indifferent to logic, reads that pattern. It doesn't hear your wish list, it tunes into the emotional climate you maintain. Over time, opportunities arrive that fit that climate: small, safe, familiar. They confirm the habit, and so the loop spins faster. Scarcity also hides in how we protect ourselves socially. A polite "I'll pass" in conversation, a last-minute cancel, a reluctance to negotiate a raise, these are not neutral moves, they are practiced postures that teach your nervous system to expect limitation. Even generosity gets guarded, you give from a closed hand and your inner ledger whispers that the world is scarce. The hero's task is not to shame these behaviors but to map them, to notice where the whisper starts and how the body answers. Which scarcity thought just replayed for you as you listened? If one came up, share it below, and if you're ready, stay tuned. Next we begin the simple, practical exercises that interrupt the automatic no and teach your system to tolerate growth. He sits at the kitchen table as dawn slips through the blinds, a stack of bills like a low hill in front of him. Somewhere between the steam of his coffee and the first email notification, the old whisper curls up again: we can't risk that. It sounds like caution, like responsibility, like the voice that kept childhood dinner steady when money tightened. You can almost hear his mother's hands folding a grocery list, his father's flat warning about debt, small echoes that fastened themselves to decisions over decades. Those echoes become a pattern. They don't just answer one question, they answer every invitation. When a training course promises growth, the inner line reads the price and hangs up. When a new client could expand the business, the chest tightens, breath shortens, and he says no because fear has learned the shape of safety. Scarcity lives in gestures, the tightened fist on a checkout page, the delayed email that never sends, the polite decline rehearsed so often it becomes the default. How do you stop it? He asks aloud, as if testing the air. The first step is noticing, naming the thought without judgment. There's the I can't, he says to himself, and the voice loses some of its power. Then he practices a pause, 3 slow breaths, each longer than the last, a tiny ritual that tells the nervous system it can relax. He labels the feeling, anxiety, protectiveness, and asks a different question, what would be possible if I allowed a small yes? We try concrete experiments that don't require leaps of faith. The 60-second curiosity shift, when the old refrain plays, imagine one tiny positive outcome for a minute. The micro-risk habit, spend $1 extra this week on something joyful and notice the body response. The receiving rehearsal, every morning, set an intention to say yes to one small opportunity and congratulate yourself when you do. These practices retrain the muscle memory of decision-making, they teach the body to tolerate expansion in increments. They are not magic, but steady practice rewires expectation. He tries the exercises, stumbles, laughs at himself, continues. The chest opens more often than it used to. The next scene shows the first small experiment that shifted the curve, and what happened when curiosity replaced the automatic no. Which scarcity thought keeps replaying in your mind right now? Share it below, and if you want to keep rewiring with these steps, subscribe and come with me to the next part where we run the experiment together. The kitchen light was soft when she first heard it, an old, familiar whisper curling through the morning. We can't afford that, it said, as casually as a greeting. He was at his laptop across the table, scrolling job listings, and she watched the way his shoulders tightened whenever a pricey ad popped up. Scarcity didn't arrive as a thunderclap, it arrived as habit. Years of small no-s had woven themselves into the soundtrack of their home, declining a dinner with friends because it's expensive, delaying a course until later, choosing a cheaper option that left them wishing. In a voice that was equal parts tired and tender I asked, when did saying no become safer than saying yes? He shrugged, looking at the chipped mug in his hands as if the chip itself were proof. Scarcity begins in a bodily reaction. A memory, your grandmother's warning, a past mistake, triggers a tightening in the chest, and the mind invents reasons to keep that tightness safe. That tightening becomes the main character in your decisions. So the first practical step is simple and physical, name the sensation. When the whisper appears, say out loud, there's contraction. Feel the jaw unclench by a millimeter. Speak it like a fact, not a verdict. That tiny act creates distance between you and the habit. Next, practice the micro yes. Choose one small, low-risk expansion this week, order a slightly nicer meal, enroll in a short workshop, reply to a networking email with curiosity instead of excuses. Before you act, breathe for 8, inhale for 4, hold 4, exhale 8, so your nervous system has permission to tolerate more. After the act, notice what changes in your body. Did you survive? Did something new open? Finally, build a daily visualization of sensible abundance. Imagine a real scene, your mailbox with a check, your calendar filled with clients, the sound of laughter around a paid-for dinner. Describe it in sensory detail for 2 minutes each morning. Let the emotion be small and steady rather than explosive. These are exercises in retraining muscle memory. Your nervous system must learn that receiving is not a threat. Which scarcity thought keeps replaying in your mind right now? If this landed with you, tap like and stay with me or subscribe to follow the next guided practice, where we'll sit together through the first real expansion and let the body learn to hold more. You remember the first time the voice spoke so small you almost missed it, standing in the supermarket aisle, fingers hovering over a jar of olive oil, hearing that's too expensive. Later, it became louder in other rooms of your life, a pause before applying for a job, a hesitation when opening an investment platform, the instinct to say no to an invitation that could expand your network. I want you to picture one of those moments now. See the lighting, the sound of the refrigerator, the texture of the label between your fingers. Hear the tiny refusal. Now imagine I'm beside you, calm and steady. Name it, I say. The hero in our story breathes, whispers the thought out loud, and the sound changes its power. Naming converts a ghost into a thing you can handle. That's the first practical step: notice, name, and breathe. A slow inhalation, a count to 4, then out for 6. The nervous system listens to this rhythm and begins to trust that contraction is optional. Next comes a small experiment. Choose one scarcity thought that replays most often. For 7 days, when it arises, respond with a micro-action that contradicts it. If the mind says, "I can't afford it," do a tiny, inexpensive act of receiving: buy a cup of coffee from a new place, sign up for a free webinar, or accept a compliment without deflecting. Each tiny yes is a muscle rep for allowance. Keep a pocket journal, jot the moment, the thought, the action, and one sentence about how your body felt afterward. Over time, those notes become evidence you can carry into doubt. We also train tolerance for growth by titration, stepping into slightly larger possibilities without leaping so far your nervous system panics. Invite sensations, curiosity, discomfort, and the faint thrill of possibility. When fear flares, place a hand over your heart and whisper, "I can meet this." Not because danger is gone, but because you are practicing meeting it differently. Scenes will change as you practice: fewer frozen pauses at the checkout, more confident clicks on apply, a steadier voice at the kitchen table when saying, "Let's invest." Which scarcity thought keeps replaying in your mind right now? Share it below, and if you want the next guided practice, a 7-day sequence to rewire your default, subscribe so we can walk it together. In the next part, we test these steps in a real-life money choice and watch how the body remembers possibility. You find them everywhere, the small, clipped sentences that tuck themselves into your day like a draft under a door. In the kitchen, the hero hesitates at the checkout, whispering, "I shouldn't." At the desk, a calendar reminds them of bills and the inner voice tightens, "Not now." I walk with them through these rooms, light on the counter, the hum of a laptop, a park bench at dusk, and we slow the moments down until the habit is visible. Notice it, I say, and they do. The first tool is interruption, a single audible breath, a palm pressed to the chest, a conscious 3 count that says stop to the reflex. The breath breaks the pattern, the body relaxes long enough for a different choice to appear. We practice a short conversation with the future self. Across a kitchen table lit by morning, the hero imagines a version of themselves who has learned to receive. "Tell me one small thing you did differently," I coach, and they answer, unsure at first, then clearer, "I allowed an opportunity, I said yes to learning." Saying it aloud shifts the inner weather. Next, we rehearse micro-acceptances, allowing a slightly bigger tip, buying a modest course, opening an email that promises an invitation. Each tiny yes rewires the nervous system's tolerance for growth. The scenes feel cinematic because the senses are engaged: the warmth of sunlight on their arm when they choose, the flutter of surprise when a new contact replies, the steadying hum of possibility. We also name the story's scarcity uses. Together we turn them into characters and set them in a play where they no longer run the plot. I can't becomes a narrator in a small role, not the director. Gratitude practice follows, but not the shallow kind: specific, detailed gratitude for one practical thing today that your allowance made possible. The hero begins to notice pattern breaks, a curiosity replaces the tightness, decisions are met with "how could this work," rather than "what could go wrong." If you feel that tightening in your chest now, pause and breathe with me. Which scarcity thought keeps replaying in your mind right now? If this shift resonates, tap the like so others find this path, and stay with me. Next, we'll map how those micro yeses gather into momentum and how to protect that momentum from old habits. The kitchen light is soft, the hero's mug steaming in their hands like a small, steady sun. Paper bills lie fanned across the table, numbers that used to tighten the throat into that familiar no. Today, instead of closing the folder, they breathe and say aloud what the inner voice has whispered for years: "I can't." The mentor across from them watches without judgment and asks, quietly, what happens in your body when you say that? The answer comes like a memory, a hollow behind the ribs, a fastening at the throat, a shrinking that contracts the whole world into caution. We linger there, close enough to hear the inner conversation, and then we interrupt it. The mentor teaches a tiny ritual: place one hand over the heart, inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. Name the sensation without story, tightness, and then ask with curiosity, if this feeling had a message other than no, what might it be? The hero tries. The muscles unclench by degrees. The no loses some of its authority when it's simply observed. Then a small experiment: choose a safe margin, make a small purchase that feels like a different kind of yes, a book on a park bench, a headphone upgrade that adds pleasure, an extra bag of fruit. The first impulse is guilt, the second impulse is to notice the moment after the purchase, the way sunlight lingers on the new object, the way the body recalibrates to permission. The mentor smiles. You're reteaching your nervous system that growth is tolerable, she says. It will accept slow, consistent rehearsal. A week passes in quick cuts. The hero practices a curiosity question when scarcity surfaces: what if there's enough? They journal for 5 minutes each night, naming 3 small receivings. They ask for a modest raise using concrete value language. Each micro-action rewires the default. Then a phone call: a client offers an unexpected short contract. It's not a windfall, it's a signal. The emotional pattern that used to shout scarcity has learned a new tune: allowance. This isn't magic. It's steady, repetitive retraining. Which scarcity thought keeps replaying in your mind right now? If this landed with you, share it below, and if you want the guided practice that anchored their first real permission to receive, subscribe and stay with me for the next step. The street outside is quiet as the sun slides behind the row of maple trees. Inside, the hero, someone you could be, someone you know, stands at the kitchen counter with a steaming cup in hand. The stack of envelopes that once felt like a mountain now sits beside an open notebook filled with tiny experiments: one small yes, a 5-minute breathing pause, a written permission to be curious. Months ago that inner voice would have pointed at the envelopes and said, no risk. Tonight it leans back, softer, asking, what if? I remember the night he called me, voice tight and tired: what if I lose everything? I didn't give him a formula. I told him a story about a woman who let herself say yes to a single advertisement for a class, not because she expected riches, but because she was teaching her body to tolerate the new. You could hear the skepticism and then, later, the quiet surprise when she reported that a freelance opportunity arrived within weeks. It felt possible, she said. My hands didn't shake. That change is not magic, it's rehearsal. It's the evening spent noticing the automatic can't, labeling it aloud, and choosing one harmless action that says, I'm allowed to try. It's the repeated practice of breathing into the body when the stomach tightens, naming the fear, and then asking for a smaller step. It's the neighbor who knocks with a forgotten jar and ends up mentioning a client who needs help, an opening you used to close with I'm not ready, but now answers with, tell me more. You can feel it, the difference between contracting and leaning. The chest that used to bristle now softens, the voice that said better not becomes curious, cautious, alive. Prosperity, in this sense, arrives as a byproduct of new nervous system habits: tolerance for possibility, a taste for small experiments, the humility to befriend uncertainty. If this landed for you, tap like. What scarcity thought keeps replaying in your mind right now? Share it below, say it aloud here, and you may notice how saying it changes it. If you want more gentle practices to retrain that habit and open space for steady growth, subscribe and we'll walk this next phase together.